Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Deadite Patrick.
Full on demon voice tonight, I see.
Oh, dude. Listen, I want to give credit right off the top of the show to the heartbeat, the heart and soul, the engine that runs this show, Damon Martin. Because after we reviewed Evil Dead Rise, which you haven't listened to that yet, go listen to that. We were having our little after show chat, which we always do. And I could just see Damon Martin had a bug up his ass. And he was like, we need to talk about Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead. Like, we just need to, like right now is a perfect time to do it. There's not a ton of like brand new horror out there for everybody to get into your face. And after the high of talking about Evil Dead Rise, you were just like, dude, we got to talk about Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead. And I'm glad we did, because it's one of those movies for me, Damon, that is like, it's like a little like piece of shrapnel stuck in the back of my skull. And I'm always itching and being like, God damn, Evil Dead Rise is Evil Dead 2013 is fucking crazy. And you were just like, let's do it. Let's fucking do it. And we're fucking doing it tonight.
Yeah, we are. And, I wish I had a better excuse than watching Evil Dead Rise, which again, go back and listen to that episode. I listened to it and I loved it. And I'm not, trying to pat ourselves on the back too hard here, but I loved that episode. But afterwards, we were kind of thinking about ideas. And funny enough, we'd actually talked about reviewing the Blair Witch Project, which just happens to be the t-shirt I'm wearing today. But after that, I was like,
we'll get to that.
I was like, you know what? Like, why don't we just go and do the 2013 Evil Dead? Because I've said on this show before that typically speaking, I am not the biggest Evil Dead franchise fan. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like the films. I don't want the Deadites out there to freak out and say, oh my God, this is a horror movie podcast. You don't like Evil Dead. No, I actually really do like Evil Dead. I just didn't grow up with it the same way I grew up with Nightmare on Elm Street and then eventually later with like Scream. Those were kind of my two, my kid franchise, then graduated into like when I was a little bit older, Scream was kind of like my franchise. I didn't grow up loving Evil Dead the way a lot of people did. Now, again, not to rehash everything I said in the last episode, I do enjoy Evil Dead. But I will say this, Patrick. I loved the 2013. I'm just bearing the lead here. I loved the 2013 Evil Dead, and it was the one that kind of, I was like, man, like this is intense. This is a different kind of movie. Mm-hmm. And then I loved Evil Dead Rise, and I absolutely loved Evil Dead Rise. And I was like, wow, and so like watching that and then going back and revisiting 2013, I'm kind of becoming a little bit more of an Evil Dead guy, Patrick. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think I needed to be immersed in it more than I was, because while I do appreciate, and obviously I love what Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 did, and even to a different extent to Army of Darkness, I feel like Army of Darkness is a bit of an outlier because it just feels like such a different film than the first two and then the other two. But watching these two films back to back made me realize like how much I do enjoy this universe. Like, again, I've kind of been separated from it. Generally speaking, I would watch Evil Dead 2 and then maybe I'd see Army of Darkness a year later or whatever. I was very separated from the franchise between films. Seeing these back to back kind of made me more of an Evil Dead fan. And I think this is honestly, there's probably a handful of remakes, and I think this is more of a reimagining than a remake necessarily, although there are some iconic.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. This one, along with maybe Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and there's a couple others. I'm not going to sit here and name every one of them, but there's a couple other ones that the remake pays homage, but also does its own originality in a way that separates it, yet feels familiar to the point where I love both. I love the original George Romero Dawn of the Dead, the classic 1976. I can't remember the year. I think it's 76. Dawn of the Dead. Loved that film. I lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years. Been to the Monroeville Mall many times where they filmed that movie. I love the original Dawn of the Dead. But I adore Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. It's a brilliant film. And outside of a couple of little similarities, it takes place in a mall during a zombie apocalypse, they feel like totally different films.
Yeah.
Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, which again, they're, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are very similar. And then going into Evil Dead, the remake or the reimagining in 2013, there are similarities, of course. They go to a cabin, the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, all these kind of things are introduced. And there are some iconic moments we'll get to later that kind of share imagery with the original Evil Dead. But this feels like such a different film, Patrick. Like, this is full-on, full-bore horror.
Yes, yeah. After watching it, and by the way, I should do this first off because I did listen back to our Evil Dead Rise episode because I'm really kind of in an Evil Dead mood lately. I mean, I'm realizing that for me, it actually has been part of my life for quite some time. I just never considered myself a hardcore fan of it. And I've what do they call it in journalism? It's like corrections and takebacks or whatever. Like we have to make this at the top of the show. We kept calling Fede Alvarez's movie The Evil Dead. That's the original movie.
Yeah.
The original movie is The Evil Dead. We kept doing it through the whole fucking podcast, and I'm going, there are Deadites out there that are going to fucking strangle us at a horror convention for getting that wrong. The original movie is the only one called The Evil Dead. Then there's Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and then 2013's Evil Dead again, right? So they're just calling it Evil Dead again. I am a fan of this franchise, and you're right. It's a fucking this 2013's Evil Dead is a fucking horror movie, like a nasty one. And I said that, I said that last week as well. I said we got ourselves a nasty ass movie in Evil Dead. And then I go, well, what's it going to be like? And it was funny, like right as I turned it on, it was giving me heavy 2000s horror film vibes. Like, in all these 2000s horror films, and we've talked about them a lot on this show, there's a few common denominators. One, angsty, kind of brooding, good-looking people. That's step one. Step two, and I wish I could credit the guy. It was some guy on like TikTok or something, and my buddy shared it on Instagram, is those intros. Well, 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 if it isn't David so-and-so, back from the blah, 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 blah. Like, it's a very, like, maybe we got to credit Kevin Williamson, who wrote all the Scream movies, for like creating sort of a weird shorthand between all these characters. Every time they intro each other, it's like ribbing and weird talking. We were getting that all at the top of 2013's Evil Dead. I was like, oh shit, this is like a legit 2000s horror movie to start. But then it does something that none of those movies did, which is it slit your throat and shoved your face in the mirror and made you watch yourself bleed out. Like it just got so nasty and so dark, which I think was a problem. Not a I mean, problem's a weird way to say it. It's just like movies from the 2000s didn't go that hard. You were even talking about the Texas Chainsaw remake, didn't go that hard. Friday the 13th remake kind of did a little bit. Texas Chainsaw the beginning went kind of hard, but like they didn't like go for it. They kind of tried to change it into some edgy post Matrix world like stuff. This felt like a fucking dyed in the wool classic horror, like really just something from a bygone era. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the history of what evil? There's this great debate going on, and I was doing a little bit of research. I'm sure you did a ton about where this actually fits in the canon of Evil Dead.
Yeah, so I love so here cool. So as I mentioned in the intro, there's a behind the scenes feature on the Evil Dead 2013 Blu-ray, which I watched. And there's a nice little behind the scenes where they talk about and they actually interview the producers. They interview Fede Alvarez, and they also interview Bruce Campbell, and they talk about how this film came together. And again, as I mentioned in the intro, Sam Raimi was all for it. He's like, let's do it. Like, remake it. A better filmmaker could do better than I did. Let's do it. Let's have at it. Get a young filmmaker. Let them do better than what I did. Very self-deprecating, but also handing it over to the next generation of filmmakers. His executive producer was also on board, Robert Tappert. He's like, let's do it. This will be great. Bruce Campbell was the only one who was like, no, I don't want to see it redone. I just don't want. Ash is, I don't want to see someone trying to redo my performance, and just it's not for me. And then they met Fede Alvarez, and he had a treatment. He was a huge Evil Dead fan. Of course, he's originally from Uruguay, so he's not. He didn't grow up necessarily immersed in the American horror culture, but obviously where he grew up as an Evil Dead fan, and he immediately had an idea and he pitched it. And when Bruce Campbell heard it wasn't Ash, it was a different story. So a reimagining more than a remake, as we talked about earlier. Yes, is it technically a remake? There are some similar beats, yes, but it's not strictly a remake. It's not. Like, it's not the same film. There are similar parts, of course. It takes place in the woods, young group of friends, fall upon the Book of the Dead, read it for some unknown dumb reason, and then all hell breaks loose. But once he realized that it was almost it was a reimagining, but also in a way a sequel to the original. Like they're just carrying,
Mhm.
they were carrying on the story. I don't want to quote, I don't want to misquote Bruce Campbell from that documentary, but that's basically what he said. You're not remaking it, you're carrying on the story for the next generation of Evil Dead fans. And when that immediately clicked in Bruce Campbell's head, and he's like, "Let's do it, let's go." And he produced it. Sam Raimi produced it. Everyone was on board. And so this was not a situation where it was taken away from a creator and a studio just said, "Here, we're going to hand it to somebody else, and you're going to make it." You know, I remember a few years ago, which by the way, the guy who originally created it, of course, seems like he's a real piece of dog shit, but when they were originally doing when the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they were talking about doing the remake, and everyone was like, you know, how are you going to do this? Like, how are you remaking a classic TV show? And it wasn't going to have Joss Whedon involved, and it wasn't going to have anybody from the original cast involved, and it's just because Fox owned it, and they were going to have somebody else do it. Now, we can sit here and argue all day about how much, you know, creators should have control or not control when you sell a product, whatever the case may be. Me personally, I'm a big believer in, you know, just like with John Carpenter, when David Gordon Green, before he ruined it, when he was going to make 2018's Halloween, he didn't need to go to John Carpenter to get permission. John Carpenter doesn't own that anymore. Like, he doesn't own the Halloween franchise. Anytime it's made, it says, you know, inspired by characters created by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, whatever, but he doesn't own it. He doesn't have, no one needs his permission to do a Halloween film. But David Gordon Green took it upon himself, and it was very important to him to go get John Carpenter's blessing. And John Carpenter said, "Yeah, go for it, do it. And I'll even do the music." And boy, did he do the music, which ended up being the best part, especially if Halloween ends. I digress. Sam Raimi and these guys were all on board. And once Bruce Campbell got on board, they're like, let's go. And so the way it fits into the canon, in my imagination, or the way that they kind of explain it is, it's just a carryover of the original films. And one other thing I want to mention here, not to spoil Evil Dead Rise, it's been out for a couple weeks now. This isn't really a spoiler. Obviously, if you go see Evil Dead Rise, you know at some point the Necronomicon is going to pop up to Book of the Dead. But it's pretty brilliant because now they have said there are three Book of the Dead, three pieces of the same book all coming together. One book is the one we saw in the original Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. The second book is what we see in 2013's Evil Dead. And the third book, the third Necronomicon, is what we see in Evil Dead Rise. So, technically, this isn't a remake or even a reimagining. It is technically part of the Evil Dead canon now.
I love it. It's mythology. I'm working on something with a buddy of mine right now, and we're talking about that. Like, creating mythology is so important. And now, in this instance, Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, Robert Tappert, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, like they're all still here, and they all are still very much like champions of this work, which is really cool to see. And I did read that they were trying to be coy about it when Fede Alvarez was making it, going, well, we don't want to like define it solidly. And Fede like flat out was like, I'm not going to say if it's like connected or not. And then they finally just realized like this is part of the grand mythology of this all, and it makes total sense to be part of it all. And I like that they did that. It's creating some sort of a like shared ownership. So now all the movies should be able to take that with them and go, okay, well, where did that Book of the Dead go? We know they can't burn, so they're not going to be destroyed. Or it doesn't seem like those books can be destroyed. So it feels like even after, and I hope this day doesn't come anytime in my lifetime, but after we lose Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and Robert Tappert, that the filmmakers that take it from that point on take that idea of this is all a connected world without having to connect the people. You don't have to connect one story to the next one. You just need that book. The book of the Dead, the three books of the Dead are the connection between all these movies. And you just tell a story of a group of people who unfortunately come across it and go through an absolute terrible night of hell. 2013's Evil Dead is, I think, so far in this saga of the Evil Dead, the most terrifying night that of all of them. And boy, the one in Evil Dead Rise is pretty bad. It's pretty damn bad. But what the fuck, Damon? What the fuck is wrong with Fede Alvarez?
I
It's
I
so dark.
I kind of forgot because I hadn't seen this movie in a few years. I kind of forgot how fucking crazy this movie is. Like, I
Yeah.
remembered, but then I didn't remember. And when it got into it and it got to the gore and it got to some of the grosser parts of this movie, and I say that not because it really grossed me out, but even I was like, oh my God, why do I not remember it being this bonkers? Like, full on just batshit and gory and bloody. I mean, my God, and it was like visceral, and it just. I don't know if it had been just because it had been a few years since I'd watched it, but when I sat down and rewatched it again the other night, I was like, man, like this was like I thought like I know everyone like the gold standard of gore these days, everyone talks about Terrifier, and don't get me wrong, Terrifier and Terrifier 2 are very gory films. But Evil Dead, man, it's giving anybody a run for its money. Let me tell you, 2013's Evil Dead is full on bonkers, and it is. I mean, it is horror. And I said this during the Evil Dead Rise podcast, Patrick. I said that film to me was the perfect amalgamation of the original and then this one because it's far gorier, far more horror than the original Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, but it's not as hardcore horror as Evil Dead 2013. And so I said it's kind of like the perfect, it's like the child of those two
Yeah.
films. And I still stand by that because it is, but oh my God, did I just not like, I think I might have like traumatized myself and blocked it out of my memory how like out there, and I'm not saying out there in a bad way, I'm like, how full on just, they're just like, so we're going to cut this and stab this and bleed this, and oh, we're going to rain blood, we're going to chainsaw this, we're going to set this on fire, we're just gonna go for it all in one film. And I don't remember if I just blocked it out, but when I was watching, I was like, why does this seem gorier than I remember it being? And I loved every second of it, but I was like, holy shit. This movie is the kind of movie that makes Damien Leon sit down and go, well shit, I need to really up the ante for Terrifier 3.
No shit. And the thing with Terrifier is there's sort of like a touch of playfulness to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's no playfulness in Evil Dead 2013. There's none. And even the premise, the idea that like this group of friends is bringing Mia, played by Jane Levy, to the isolated woods to get her to detox her off of some. Yeah, they're trying to sober her up, and they know they need to get her isolated so she doesn't run away and go get high again. So even the subject matter is heavy, and everybody's sullen. It's still, again, like that early 2000s, the very like angsty young people thing. No one's happy. People are angry at each other. Like Eric and Olivia are kind of mad at David, her brother, because he hasn't really been around while she's been struggling with drug abuse. It's just like heavy subject matter. And then on top of the heavy subject matter, everybody gets fucking torn to shreds by the Deadites. And it's like nasty and ugly. I mean, very ugly, like really great, incredible practical effects. My gore list is like off the charts long. It's super long. I was like, this might be the longest. The only one that could maybe tackle this is Terrifier 2. As in terms of like a list of gore that I was just like, this list never ends. There's so much gore in this movie. And another thing, like tonally, about like, I don't know, an hour and 20 minutes of the movie, I was like, oh, Fede Alvarez really loves French extremism. He's got to, because it had like, it just has this unrelenting nastiness to it, this unrelenting pain and suffering, and every single character is going through some shit to the point that we even put a category up for it this time, because holy fuck, everybody in this movie is getting destroyed by the Deadites. This is the kind of Deadite you don't want to run into any of them, and every episode of this series has been clear about that. Like, don't run into the Deadites. It's going to be awful. Evil Dead Rise showed just how awful they can be to kids. This showed how awful they could be to a bunch of young adults. It's not pretty. It's terrifyingly ugly.
It is, and I want to mention to you one thing you said there that I really liked about this film, because we talk about character development and story, and once the craziness gets going, of course it's just it's nonstop, it's adrenaline. There's no slowing down at that point. But what I do enjoy so much about the setup of this film is that you get you get the opening with the girl who's possessed, and then you come to find out that it was in the basement of this cabin where they end up in the woods, and they're trying to detox. They're basically having an intervention with Mia, not an intervention, but they're basically a self-made rehab in the woods. They're basically trying
Yeah.
to do they have their friend Olivia who's a nurse, and they're all trying to basically be there for Mia, and right away, you see early on, there's this tension between them because, again, David, her brother, has been, kind of distant, and he hasn't been there through all of these situations where she's relapsed and fallen off the wagon, so to speak. And so her friends kind of hold that against him a little bit. And he's trying to be there for his sister, and there's tension there. And you immediately feel that in the room. And again, that speaks a lot about then when the craziness starts happening, it just everything ratchets up a notch because you already knew there was this like underlying tension between these characters, but there was also an underlying care for all these people. Like they were mad, but they also cared about each other. Just like with David and Mia, like David loved his sister and he felt guilty. You could see it in his eyes very early on in this film. He felt guilty that he wasn't there for her. And so now he's trying to make up for lost time, and they play that guilt heavily throughout the film, especially when you see the Deadite, turn back into Mia and then turn back into the Deadite, trying to guilt him into letting her go because he know that character, that demon knows that David feels bad for not being there for his sister. So I love the character development, as minor as it may seem in this film, Patrick. I really do love that because you do get a sense of how these people know each other, why they care about each other, but also why they don't like each other too much right now, at least a couple of them. There is an underlying tension there. And then when you're dealing with a drug addict, and like Mia talks about, I mean, at that point, if you've ever been around addicts of any kind, and I've spent a lot of time in my life around addicts, when they are in need of a high or coming down in withdrawal, they will all the things you're never supposed to say. They will say, you know what I mean? Like all the
Yeah.
things are like, man, you should never say that. Like, you don't mean that. Oh, they mean it, and they're gonna say it. And Mia she erupts in those moments, and it's really uncomfortable, a lot of tension. But then once she gets in the car and goes out trying to get away from everybody, and then she crashes the car, and then she gets attacked. From then on out, it is just, I mean, it is like having someone slowly tack a nail into your forehead. Like it hurts, and it's not getting any better for the next hour and a half.
It's unrelenting. It's so unrelenting. And I really like it when I keep kind of coming back to this idea of the 2000s horror, and how most of it never went that hard. Like not American horror didn't really go that hard. Foreign horror, international horror had been
And
going that hard.
there had been a PG-13ification of a lot of 2000 horror at that point. Like
Yeah.
Scream was R-rated, and then they kind of like, oh, hold on here, we can get teens at the theater. Well, we got to make it PG-13. They won't go see R-rated horror. So a lot of the 2000s horror was PG-13. Like a lot of it was like they went hard R. They went R for Scream. And they're like, well, hold on here. We get a bigger audience. So we just take out a little bit and then go PG-13. So a lot of that 2000s horror was PG-13.
Yeah, and it was neutered. It was neutered so that way the kids could go see it in droves, and they did. It was still a successful time for horror in that respect. And I felt like 2013's Evil Dead was sort of the death nail of that era. It was like, yeah, this looks familiar on the outside. This looks like all the other 2000s horrors, but we are going to kill them, murder them 3 times over, cover them in acid, and run them across rusty nails. Like it was just like, let's kill that and move to the next thing. And really, I feel like that was sort of the turning point anyway. Right around the mid 2010s to 2015s is when you got into horror that was a little more extreme, a little more hardcore, and it probably kicked off with this movie. Did you see it in the theaters?
I did not actually. I did not.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the theaters, and I do regret that now because seeing it at home,
Big time.
I loved seeing it. I mean, like I said, when I saw it originally, I want to say maybe like a year after it came out. I know I didn't see it in the theater. Maybe like a year later, I saw it, and yeah, I didn't see it then. And I wish I had. Like that's one of those films. Like I wish I could go back in time because some films are made for theater experiences. This is a film that would have been tremendous to see in the theater.
And you know what? Else, so another thing I loved about what Fetty did with this movie, and we talked a little bit about it with Lee Cronin's Evil Dead Rise, is you had to make it kind of your own thing. And I think even though this movie now has way more nods and way more um, reverence towards what Sam Raimi did, even in the camera work at times and stuff like that. I think what Fetty did with making it nasty and making it ugly and just coming up with the worst, darkest ways to get in and out of this movie. I really respected that. Now, help me out here, Damon, because it's been a while since I've watched the Evil Dead movies. What in those movies was there a way to cure yourself being infected by the Deadites?
No, not because
Right. I don't
that's yeah,
think there was.
that's the whole premise in Evil Dead 2 in particular, when Ash's hand gets infected and his arm starts turning against him and he has to hack off his own arm to stop his entire body from being infected. So yeah, at that point it's not. Just like what I think his girlfriend's name is Linda in the second one, like she dies and keeps coming back for him. There is no cure at that point. Once you are infected by a deadite, you are more or less screwed.
And that's what I love about what Fetty did was Fetty said, what if there's a way to cure yourself of being a deadite? And really the Book of the Dead is so important to this whole series. It's very important to Evil Dead Rise. It's obviously very important to the other earlier works. In this one, the book seemed to be the way out. Like this book in particular had the cure in it, which I think is going to be important to the larger like mythology of the whole series. One of these books has the goddamn cures, and one of and the cures are usually just kill the motherfucker, break them into pieces, and make sure they never live. But our hero David, he hacked the system. I loved that about this movie. So what happens obviously is Mia, like you said, goes out in the woods. She gets infected by the deadite because her dodo friend Eric opens the book, and right at the page where giant letters it says "Do not read," he reads. He reads the incantation. He brings the force about, and the Deadites find Mia because she's the most damaged of them all. And they infect her. They bring her back to the cabin, and I mean, so I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But my point, my point is that David hacked the system. He went into the book, and he goes, "Oh shit." One of the ways to cure someone of a deadite, besides lighting them on fire, which we see in the cold open, besides chopping them up into a bunch of pieces and getting rid of it, which is what we see a little bit of in Evil Dead Rise, there's one other one: bury them alive. And David goes, "Fuck, all right, I'll do that." He takes his sister, he buries her alive in a dark scene. Oh, it's such a fucking dark scene. He buries her alive, but he has a plan to let her die, kill her. That should cure her, and then he's gonna bring her back to life. And it fucking worked.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. Like, it just never struck me before, even though I've watched this movie a couple of times. I was like, the cure for deaditism is in this movie. Like in all the other movies, I remember saying last week when we were talking about Evil Dead Rise, I go, oh, well, the Deadites are going to win in the end. Turns out there's a way to cure yourself of becoming infected with the Deadite demon, with becoming possessed, basically. There's a ritual to get you back. So
Yeah.
this movie has a very, very, very important piece of the puzzle. It's like in Friday the 13th Part 3 when we found the hockey mask.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, this is a big piece of the puzzle.
So, two things I want to mention about that. One, I agree. That was a really cool little twist in this with this particular version of the Necronomicon, is that it did present a way for you to exorcise the demon, but none of them were good. You had to burn them alive. Okay, they actually, they said their ways in the movie: burn them alive, and obviously, bury them alive, and whatever it was, chop them into pieces. None of them are good. And the way you exorcise the demon is basically by killing the person. When David thought about burying her alive and then bringing her back, like basically reviving her through a homemade defibrillator, which we'll talk about later, that's a pretty, as you said, he hacked it, because really burying her alive, she should be dead. She'd be burned, and he was going to burn her alive until she started singing
Yeah.
the childhood song, and he's like, I can't do it, and then he decides to save her instead. But he was going to burn her alive, and that knowing so. Even in that moment, he was still like, I'm just going to dust her. I'm gone. Like, she's dead. The other thing I want to mention, Harry, one thing we've talked about a lot on this show, because again, you know me, I'm the plot guy. I love a good story. I need a good story. And we've talked many, many times on the show, Patrick, about characters making really stupid decisions in horror films. Now, that's a staple of horror, right? You know, you run up the stairs instead of when you should go out the door. They say it in Scream, it's true. You should not be doing what you it's the insurance commercial with the makes fun of horror movies where the kids are like, let's go for that running car. He's like, you're crazy. And they're standing, he's like, let's go run behind that wall of chainsaws. Like, that's the stupid decisions. People, we've talked about this many times. And it's frustrated you to the point of no exhaustion on some episodes where you're like, I can't fathom the decision making. So I want to address the decision making in one particular part in this story. The very
Please.
beginning, Mia smells something rancid in the cabin. And no one else does at first, but then they discover, when they pull back a rug, they discover the opening to go down into the basement. When they go down to the basement, they found all of these upside down, hung, dried animals, killed animals, a burn post. And we realize this is the opening of the film where the girl was possessed and her father basically had to burn her alive to purify her soul, so to speak. Now, in any other scenario, and this we'll get to, we'll definitely have a category about this later about would you survive this horror film. In any other scenario, when you walk into a basement filled with dead animals and the smell of rotting human flesh, get the fuck out. Get out. But I'm gonna give this movie a slight pass, Patrick, which is rare. Here's why I'm doing it.
Okay.
And this
Please.
is why I don't know if this is how it happened. I didn't see them explain this. But the fact that they were there as like an intervention, as a rehab to get her off drugs, that scenario, that need, that care, and especially in David, who's been guilt-ridden this entire movie, that need to take care of Mia outweighed the general good sense that you would have in that moment just to leave. They're like, no, we can't go because we need to be here for Mia, and she's gonna beat this thing. And I don't care how bad this shit is in the basement, we need to be there for her. Now, I don't know if there's another version of the script where it was just 5 kids going on a camping trip. I don't think it was, but I'm playing hypotheticals here, Patrick. If there was a version of that, I would really get angry that you would see all that and just not leave. But in that moment, peppered throughout, and we talked about the character development earlier, Patrick, throughout the whole movie, we have this underlying care for Mia, the guilt that their friends haven't been able to keep her off drugs, because every single time this has ever happened, she escapes, something happens, she relapses, whatever. They've tried this before. And then David is just completely weighed down with guilt because he feels like he hasn't been there for his sister, and his other friends are pretty much telling him that. Like, you haven't been here, dude. She's been going through this for a while now, and you were never here until now. So in that moment, I was like, you know what? Like, I don't know if that was the plot device, and they said we have to give them a better reason to be in this cabin than just a weekend retreat. Because any normal person would get out in that. I don't care if you own the cabin, they own the cabin. I don't care if you own the cabin, it's your parents' cabin. I don't care if someone rented you get out. Send somebody in there to clean it up, figure out what the hell happened, and then come back when it's all cleaned up. You do not stay there. But the fact that they actually put that as part of the plot about why they stayed there and why they had to be there for Mia going through withdrawal, I was like, you know what? This is the one time where characters are making a really stupid decision, yet it makes sense because in that moment you are so overwrought with guilt that, yeah, you would probably stay. Like, you would probably be like, you know what, this is awful, but I can't abandon my sister.
This is 100% right.
I wanted to mention that because in any other scenario right now, you would be pulling your hair out and railing on this film for these people doing what they did. But this is one time where I was like, this actually makes sense why they stayed.
It's in my notes because I was getting frustrated. For the first time, like soaking it in with my podcast brain on, I was like, this is fucking insane. First of all, the place is in such dilapidation. It's like ridiculous that they even went out there. I guess it's an old family cabin. That's how they're playing it. But the place was so shitty to begin with. I was like, why would you even pick this place? Like, go pick somewhere else. Like, this place is, it's, I mean, it's condemned. It's terrible. It's really bad. And then they find the cats and the fucking, the evidence of maybe a ritual sacrifice downstairs. But it did make at least enough sense to say, okay, all this really sucks, but like also, and the characters make it very clear, like Mia has overdosed in the past, and if she relapses again, she's probably going to die. This is kind of a do or die situation for us, and that kept them there. And then there was like little sprinkles of dialogue where it was just like, hey, you know, when she starts really hitting these bad withdrawals, she's going to say or do anything to get out of here. So when the Deadite took over her and she starts acting weird, she's acting weird because she's in their minds, she's acting weird because she's withdrawing, so she's becoming almost possessed, if you will. So that doesn't, you know, seem that crazy. And even when she like hurts herself by boiling her skin in the shower, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. She's trying to get out of here. She's trying to force us to take her to the hospital so she can get some drugs, and that's because she's trying to overcome these overwhelming withdrawals. So it made sense. It took her literally blowing through the door and having a demonic voice and being like, you're all gonna fucking die tonight, to be like, oh, okay, you know what, I think it's something else. And by that point it's too late. And then they make logical decisions. Then they go, all right, fuck it, get her into the Jeep, let's get the fuck out of here. And they couldn't. At that point it was too late. Once they made their logical choices, the movie pushed back and said, sorry, we're now ahead of you, we're now steps ahead of you. But the illogical choices they were making were to save her. They thought at first, and it makes total sense, these are, you know, some 20 somethings, they're just going, we got to do whatever it takes to save our Mia. So from this drug addiction she's got. So I was like, yeah, it actually does make sense. I mean, it's still crazy, and I still probably would have been like, you know what, they probably burned a body down there, we should leave, let's just find somewhere else to stay. That's probably what I would have done. But hey, they stuck it out, a couple of dummies in there. But either way, that device, the device of her trying them trying to detox her, made sense to keep them there.
Yeah, it was actually a really smart way to twist it to where I wasn't like, why are you there? Why are you staying there? And again, as you said, when they tried to finally come to their senses and leave, it was too late. At that point, it was gone, and they ran into the road that had been, you know, flooded, and then they're screwed. Like, and that, you know, that's when you realize, like, you've gone too far, and there's no way to go back. And I think it was a really, really well, you know, really, really cool way to do it. And I wanted to mention that because, again, story wise, that's a pretty brilliant plot device as to why they would stay. Because in any other scenario, I would say I love the gore, I loved the execution, I loved the practical effects, but that part would bug me, and they
Yeah,
found a way around it. So yeah, let's
clever.
let's get into categories, Patrick. 'Cause we got a lot of categories with this particular movie, and let's kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show with best performance. This is a, I'll be honest, like for a lot of actors who I kind of know, a lot of that guys in this movie, like I know I've seen him or I've seen her in other things, but like not full on A, maybe even B list kind of actors. Solid performances all the way around, but who is your best performance in Evil Dead?
My best performance goes to Jane Levy as Mia, our title character. She gets to play a Deadite, which we talked last week about. I think her name was Sutherland or Sutherland.
Alyssa Sutherland.
Alyssa Sutherland. Thank you. Yeah, she played the Deadite mom in Evil Dead Rise. Well, Mia plays the Deadite Mia in this movie, and man, she's channeling a lot of shit. You know, it's a different take. It's a completely different take than what Alyssa did with the Evil Dead Rise one, which was sort of this like beastie, like Spider Woman or something. This was more on the order of like Reagan in The Exorcist. It really had more of that feel. I'm not in a bad way, not in a derivative way. It was just in a way that was like, ooh, that's fucked up. Not to mention that on the lead up to her becoming a Deadite, she's a troubled young woman. She's terribly addicted to drugs, and so she's coming off of them. So she has to play that side of it as well. Then, as the Deadite, she has to kind of turn off the Deadite look for a second and become this weird version of Mia that tries to guilt people. So she's got to play on a few different levels, and she does it really well.
Yeah, so I would normally like to pick someone else, and I do want to give credit where credit's due. I will say that Shiloh Fernandez, who played her brother David, was a really solid performance as well. But overall,
Mm-hmm.
my best performance is also Jane Levy. I thought she did an incredible job early in the film dealing with the whole drug addiction thing. You know, just the terrified feeling of coming down from a high and then starting to go through withdrawal and then being just absolutely scared out of your mind when you race out of there and then being tormented in the woods and then the transformation from her as Mia into the Deadite and then back again and her in the basement. I mean, it's just everything in this film she does so well. Like this is a full-on Jane Levy spotlight. Like this is her film.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't want to say other characters didn't do a good job or other actors didn't do a good job. They did. I'm familiar with Jessica Lucas. I've seen her in other things. I think she's good. I think the whole cast is solid, but her performance just going back and forth and just overall was good. I mean, that scene when she's being buried alive and she's got the bag over her head and she switches back and forth, it's so haunting and it's so heartbreaking too because you see how much it's killing him that he's literally burying his sister alive and she's begging for her life, even though we all know that it's not her.
Yeah.
It's just it's she just really kills it. And like I said again, I do want to give credit to Shiloh Fernandez for a really solid performance as her brother, but this is the Jane Levy show, man. She does an incredible job in this film.
So haunting, so nasty as the Deadite too.
Yeah, it's just I mean, good lord, it's got to be. Um, so our next category, we don't do every single week here on Rewind the Living Dead, but it is a special category we'll break out tonight.
One testicle!
This is our One Testicle Award. Would you like to explain the One Testicle Award for anyone who maybe doesn't know this one on the show, Patrick?
Well, as you just heard, if you don't know, that's the great Nicolas Cage screaming one testicle during Prisoners of the Ghostland, one of his more obscure horror films that he contributed his great acting prowess to. He might have contributed a little too much acting to that moment. And so we, every now and then, will find the one testicle award for an actor who might be going a little over the top. But this week, it wasn't necessarily the actor that went over the top, but it was the dialogue. So what I did was I said, whoever wrote Eric's dialogue gets my one testicle award because he was just a little too melodramatic and weird. I think for some maybe somewhere in the longer version of this movie in the assembly cut, they explain that this guy actually has a little bit of background in the occult. He kind of understands the occult or something. But it's missing in the movie, so it doesn't feel like it's fully fleshed out. But it's like every moment that he got a chance to talk, it was like, we've unleashed demons of hell, and I was like, okay, you're the only thing that's not fitting in this weird puzzle. Like, but it was the dialogue. It was just something about this overly melodramatic dialogue. Which, by the way, I don't know if you knew this or not. A little bit of trivia. Diablo Cody, the very famous award-winning screenwriter, she actually came in and did punch-ups on all the dialogue for the movie, uncredited, because Fede Alvarez and his screenwriter, which I should pull the guy's name up and give him a little credit, Rodo Sayegas, their native language is Uruguayan, right? So they don't actually speak English, or they don't speak English fluently. They wrote it in Uruguayan, and she kind of helped translate it over to English and make it a little more palatable for English audiences. So I don't know who to blame necessarily, but holy shit, that guy was a little too melodramatic.
Yeah, it was funny you say that. It reminded me of the line from they're not native English speakers, so they write it in a way that doesn't quite sound like how we would typically speak in America, particularly. I always remember that scene from Die Hard Vengeance, which how I bring this one up, I like to just consider this a pop culture reference. But there's that scene in Die Hard Vengeance where Bruce Willis is going into the bank and he's talking to the guards who are actually part of the robbery team and they're from Germany or whatever, and they say that, yeah, it looks really bad out there. I think it's going to rain like dogs and cats. and he mixes it up because he means to say cats and dogs, and that's what cues in Bruce Willis, the John McClane, that he's dealing with like fake guys and not like the real bank guards, because they don't
Right.
you don't say dogs and cats. And it kind of reminded me, like, I feel like that's probably what this script was, like little things that wouldn't have sounded normal for an American to say. So Diablo Cody came in and kind of just punched up the script and kind of got it on par with what Americans would sound like versus what they think Americans would sound like, right? Because you and I have both
Yeah.
seen a lot of movies, especially in and again, this I'm quite. By the way, let me just be clear: we do have an audience in other countries. I love that we have an audience in other countries. Let me be clear about this. I am 100% sure when Americans make movie featuring people from Sweden or Germany or France,
Philippines.
we make them sound like idiots versus what they would actually sound like in their own native language, or what they actually sound like speaking in their own way. I'm admitting that. I'm acknowledging that, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying in this particular instance, they did not know the full exact way Americans would speak, and so Diablo Cody came and fixed it. That's the long way around to getting back to your point, Patrick, which was very melodramatic speech. And it's funny, we're going to do best quote in a minute. I almost pulled the one quote from him where he's sitting there after he gets into the situation with Olivia in the bathroom and he gets stabbed, and David's trying to patch him up, and he's having this really melodramatic moment where he's just like, David, I unleashed something evil, and it's the forces of hell. I'm paraphrasing that, but I almost pulled that quote.
Yeah.
It was so funny because he was just so over dramatic and melodramatic in that moment, and he was trembling and shaking. He's like, David, I released evil. I was just like, all right, you're going a little bit too much there. So I agree in your one testicle award for the dialogue, a little bit with a little bit too full bore like gothic language in that moment.
A little, it didn't quite match the moment, and that's all right. I mean, this movie's still a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I'll throw out one testicle moment. Also, I just want to say this. Overall, as I said, everyone has a great performance, but I do want to just a little nod to Elizabeth Blackmore when she's in her scene after she goes down to the basement with her character gets in the basement with Mia, and she comes back up and her arm's getting infected. The look on her face a couple of times, she goes full Nick Cage in those moments. I'm just saying, a little bit of the facial acting in those moments, of like the full wide-eyed horror where she's like, you know, it's a touch too much, a little touch of one testicle in there.
Just a little one testicle.
Just a little bit. Let's talk about best line, because there is some dialogue in this movie, and it's not the "I've released the evil."
Better to make the list.
Yeah. So let's set up that we have. Okay, so we have 3 lines, one of which is kind of shared between us, and then one line that's kind of yours, one that's kind of mine. Now we're gonna go over your first line, which is the best line for you personally, and then we'll go to the shared line. We'll kind of go in what am I looking for? What am I thinking of? In
Chronological
order. Thank you. Chronological order. So we'll start with your best quote, which is earlier in the film. Then we'll go to our shared best line, which is middle of the film, and then another one later. So what set up your best line from earlier in the film?
You hear a little bit of it in the trailer that you played, but basically, after Mia gets attacked in the woods by the Force, she comes back and she's not quite right, but she's also still kind of with us, you know, which was interesting. She was still herself, and she just knew something was wrong. And I love this scene. And it's David, right? Her brother,
Yes, David. Yep.
Yeah, it is David. Gee, that's how good I am at remembering names. I forgot after I just mentioned it. He basically comes to her thinking she's going through some terrible withdrawals, and she explains to him that no, this isn't withdrawals. There's something fucking evil, and it's in the room with us. And it goes along with how great her performance is. It's just a very haunting moment.
Me. Listen, you gotta get out of those clothes. All right, take a shower.
Please. Please. You have to get me out of here.
Yeah, look, nobody said this is gonna be easy.
No. You don't understand.
Yikes.
The whispering is just it's in here with us now.
Yeah. She's whispering for her fucking dear life. She's like, if it fucking hears us, we're fucked. And she's right. They were fucked.
I think there was a balancing in there too, because I questioned in that moment, like, how much is she actually the Deadite Mia coming into it? And I think we have to get out of here. I can't help but wonder, like, was that the Deadite trying to be freed into the world? You know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
And also, and then when she says, it's in here with us, I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, because obviously we see a little bit later she goes full on Deadite. But I'm wondering, like, in that moment, that line, I was like, is she full on Mia, or is she a little bit of the Deadite in that?
I mean, yeah, I think in the most like intricate version of this movie, all those possibilities are on the table, which really helps to kind of keep you on the hook.
Yeah. So set up the second best line, which is one we share, but I'll let you set it up because this is also Mia, but she's gone through some changes by the time she gets to this point.
Oh yeah, we're way out of withdrawal syndrome, and we're into full blown Deadite shit. And this is where I was talking about her channeling little Reagan from The Exorcist, where basically they're trying to trap now this Deadite version of Mia, who's fucking psychopathic and trying to murder everybody. And she has a few words for her brother that are they're pretty heavy, Dave.
They are.
Why don't you come down here so I can suck your cock, pretty boy?
Mia.
You're not here, you fucking idiot! Your little sister's being raped in hell!
Yeah, that's very, very full on, just again, forgive the language, that's very much full on, your mother sucks cocks in hell. Very full on Exorcist in that language. I agree. That line got me too, where I was like, I didn't remember that line rewatching the movie. I don't know if I just like, again, blocked it out or I just didn't remember the line, but I was like, damn, like that was just full on, like, yeah, it's
that's a nasty line. Like that's on all levels. Like all the things she just said are like so nasty.
Yeah. So my favorite line to end it is basically the final line from the film, which is full on Mia has escaped her Deadite and now she's fighting her doppelganger in kind of like the final sequence of the film. And she's gone through it all. She's had blood rain down upon her. Her brother's burned alive. He set the whole cabin on fire to save her. Now she's battling the doppelganger Deadite version of herself. She's lost an arm. She's got the chainsaw and she's just fucking had it. And so this is the final line from Evil Dead 2013.
I will feast on your soul. Feast on this motherfucker.
That is as classic a horror movie line as you could possibly get with the I will feast on your soul. Feast on this motherfucker.
Feast on this motherfucker. Cue the chainsaw buzzing. Like that's great. That's the best punctuation for feast on this motherfucker. Since do your thing, cuz.
Do we really need to go there, Patrick? I mean, do we really do we really need to go there?
Do your thing, cuz.
You had to do it. You had to do it.
I'll tell you, that's a line for the ages. Yeah, no, it's but your line's fantastic, dude.
Yeah, that's just a classic horror. And for anyone that maybe doesn't recognize the "Do Your Thing," cuz that's from Texas Chainsaw 3D. Is that the name of that one? Or,
that's it.
Yeah,
that's the one.
Alexandra Daddario is in that film, and oh boy, that's a special one. Go back.
What a line!
Go back and listen to that episode. We reviewed the entire Texas Chainsaw franchise. That was a doozy. Yeah,
doozy.
Let's talk about best scare, because this film again is just relentless horror from start to finish, and it is just, I mean, it is brutal, man, all the way through. So, Patrick, what was your best scare in Evil Dead?
Best scare is kind of similar to my scare from Evil Dead Rise, which is it wasn't the typical jump scare, and there's a few in here in this movie. It wasn't a jump scare as much as it was like this cringe scare, like shit, like I don't want to see that. It's fucking it makes you kind of recoil. And that was the machete cuts. Now deep into the movie, as you said, Mia got buried alive, and she came out and. Now she doesn't have the Deadite in her, but there's now a Deadite clone of her chasing her around. This Deadite clone wants all the souls. So she's coming after good Mia. When Mia's in a shed trying to hide, she has a choice. She reaches for a machete, which I'm sure is a little bit of a nod to Friday the 13th. But instead, she finds a chainsaw and she takes that because she's going to be the new Ash. So it makes sense for her to have a chainsaw. But that machete comes back to bite her. As this clone, this deadite clone, is trying to find her in a crawl space, it is like jamming this machete into the wood and it's slicing across Mia as she's trying to scurry back. And at one point, it slices right over the top of her fucking leg. And you're just like, oh no, like, I don't want to fucking see it. I just had me squirming in my seat, and I've seen it before.
Yeah, that was a really good one, and that's a really uncomfortable one too. When you just see it scrape across her knee, scrape across, and she gets cut several times, and
Yeah.
it's very uncomfortable. And I agree, that was a good one. It's so funny that you picked that as your best scare because I went in a similar direction. Because in this way, like this film has a couple of jump scares, but not really. It's not really built that way. That's not the kind of film
Yeah.
it is. It's more of just full on like gore and horror. And like I said, like Eric rising from the dead was a moment when that was a decent scare when he kind of comes back when you don't kind of see him coming. But the one I picked was actually when Olivia attacks Eric in the bathroom and she's just stabbing him with the hypodermic needle over and over again through his glasses.
Oh, that's good.
I don't have a fear of needles. I am covered in tattoos. Clearly I do not have a fear of needles.
Same.
But there's something about that little tiny pinprick that always makes my skin crawl a little bit. Like the idea of just like like, you know what I mean? Like it's like being stabbed.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like just that, like, I don't know, there's just something about that. It just kind of, again, I'm not scared of it. It's just kind of like seeing it being stabbed in that way. Good, very visceral kind of scare. Watching her just go feral and stabbing him with the hypodermic needle is really just jarring. And then he kills her. And then the full on Italian giallo horror moment is when he goes to check his glasses and he finds the hypodermic needle and he pulls it out real slowly from back underneath his eye.
Yeah.
Talk about skin crawling moment. That was the one where I was just like, oh, fuck this movie. The slow, and that's a giallo thing, obviously, the eyeballs. They're real all about torturing the eyeballs in giallo films. That was full on giallo when you see him just the hypodermic needle just being pulled slowly out from behind his eye. That was oh man, that was tough.
It's a really tough scene. Yeah, I mean, just watching her stab him through his glasses, so the glass shards are like coming at his face as he's being hit with a hypodermic needle. Without getting into it too much, but I used to have to inject myself for a little while, and I'm not really scared of needles, but I was always afraid that I would like jolt by accident and snap the needle off in my body. That's exactly what fucking happens here. Like my fear came to life and I'm like watching it. I was like, oh God, it's just as bad as you'd want it. And it's in this like really sensitive place. And they did great makeup work because after he pulls that out, his eye is never quite the same. And the area starts to swell over the period of the rest of the night. So I was like, damn, they not only just did a great fucking nasty, like under your skin type damage there, then they kind of follow it up as and they kept it consistent as the movie went on.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because as I've done recently, just a little behind the scenes info about our show. Patrick, whenever we went to the movies last year during Comic-Con, we saw Nope together, and I learned what you do during films is you actually take notes during films and you kind of keep track of what happens. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Never really kind of thought to do that during the movie. I try to go home and kind of collect my thoughts and do it then. But one thing that is just undeniably that happens is you forget things. I mean, it's just the nature of it. You remember certain moments. You're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot that happened. Especially when you've only seen a film one time. It's not like you've seen it 10 times. So I've started to take upon, paying credit to my wonderful co-host here. I have started to take notes a lot during the movies. And if I could show you my notepad for Evil Dead, it's a long ass list of gore and blood and scares. Longer than I can remember taking notes on a film anytime recently. I was like, geez, man, this really got long, but that's one that stuck with me. With that being said, this might be the toughest category to break down, which is best gore, because there's a lot of gore in this film. So, Patrick, picking one, what was your favorite gore in Evil Dead?
I think I spent an hour because the film really gets going about the 30-minute mark, but I think for at least for an hour going, oh well, that's the best gore. Oh well, that's the best gore. Oh well, that's the best gore. It just kept coming. It just kept coming and coming. And even mine is not the very final bit of gore. It's still a piece in the middle because I finally just had to fucking pick something. There was so much to choose from, and that was Natalie's bite wound and rotting arm. And you know, she plays David's girlfriend in the movie, and she gets bit by Mia, and she has this really nasty bite mark on between her thumb and pointer finger, and it just, first of all, that bite mark looks terrible. It already looks infected and rotting, you know, just moments after she's been bit because it's the deadite kind of trying to infect you, but then she's trying to wash it off. And as she's squeezing it, like these black little things are like popping out of it. That's so disgusting. First of all, terrible body horror there. And then the arm very quickly starts rotting. I mean, it looks terrible. It looks like rattlesnake bites and fucking bee stings. It looks like every possible type of rotting that could happen to an arm. Gangrene, fucking frostbite. It all starts happening to her arm. Her arm looks like fucking hell. Just the worst possible thing. It looks like something that came out of the mist. It's just fucking terrible. And then she smartly goes, well, I got to get this thing off me because it's crawling up my arm and it's trying to infect me. Then she takes the fucking the electric turkey cutter or whatever and cuts her fucking arm off, and that looks very convincing. I'm like, I think they cut a woman's arm off. I'm pretty sure they just cut a woman's arm off. Like the gore on that scene is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really, really gross in that moment. You mentioned just boils and just pus, and it's just really disgusting
Rot,
in the arm.
mold,
And then she grabs that electric knife and she just starts digging into her arm, and it just starts, blood starts flying. I mean, it is pretty gnarly. That is up there. Let me just read you a little bit of my list here. I told you a little about, you know, inside baseball thing here. So I made a list here. I just want to mention some of the ones I put down that are on my list of my favorite gore. Slithering death up the hoo-ha, which is when the black, gross, nasty, deadite snake-like thing crawls up into Mia, literally through the hoo-ha. Pretty disgusting. Boiling
Terrible.
shower, which is when Mia goes in there, turns up the, which, by the way, here, can I give you one small little plot device that I didn't like about this movie? I gotta be honest about this, Patrick. Let's call this out. You and I know we're men, right? I mean, you know, and we have women.
I've been told that, yeah.
Yes, we have women. You're married. I have a girlfriend I've been with for 11 years.
Congrats.
Thank you. The idea that a woman would go in a shower and that amount of heat would bother them, I call bullshit. Because
That's genius.
Women take the hottest showers ever, and it doesn't bother them. That's why we don't, just for like, if you ever wonder why your boyfriend doesn't shower with you, that's why.
It's too hot in there.
Because we step in there like, are we in hell? Like, where are we right now? Like, this is full on boiling water. So I do have to call kind of bullshit on the boiling shower scene, because that's just normal heat for a woman. Like, that's just, oh man, this feels great. Let me really bathe in this scalding hot water. Meanwhile, I would jump in, feel it once, jump back out and run because it is so hot.
Yeah. Oh my God, you couldn't be more right, Damon. You could not be more damn right. So every now and then I'll try and hop in there and go, ah, shit, go, motherfucker. Scalding hot. Yeah, there's no way the shower was too hot for me. There's no chance.
To quote one of my favorite comedians, D.L. Hughley, he's like talking about taking baths with his wife. He's like, you get in there, it's like boiling hot dogs. It's just, it's not fun.
It's true.
It's true.
It's true.
All right, so let's see. Boiling shower. Bloody puke shower, which was when Mia tackles was it Olivia and just full on bloody pukes all over her. That's rather disgusting. I call it Olivia's face off, which is when she literally cuts her own face off with a shard of glass, which is rather disgusting. The spreading arm infection and the saw, which is obviously the one you mentioned there. The chainsaw at the end is pretty gory, and the stab wounds are all pretty gory. So here's my one. I just want to mention that as like the long list. I was trying to like narrow it down.
You went over. You forgot something that I listed too.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Yeah, so the bloody puke one almost got me because I have a real thing about puke. I'm like, I don't get bothered by much of anything, but the puking thing I've never been a big fan of, just in general, like in life. But I
Yeah,
ended
it's not
up
fun.
going, yeah, I ended up going with the scene right before yours of Natalie and Mia in the basement when she grabs the box cutter and slices open her own tongue.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
if you've ever burned your tongue or felt something on your tongue, you know it doesn't feel good. Imagine a razor blade literally slicing between your tongue and just slicing it into it was that one made my skin crawl. That was the gore that because it's so close up and they get right in there as that thing is sawing through her tongue. It is just so nasty in that moment, and and then she says, "Give me a kiss," and then that's when that happens, which is also
Yeah.
rather disgusting. But that moment with the whole blade, the box cutter against the tongue, that got me.
Oh my God, Damon, we talk about real world, pain for a little bit. If I bite my tongue, oh my God, I'm like, got that shit. Ah, fuck. Like, and that's just me biting it, just a little bit. She full blown like splits it right down the middle. It's fucking, it's tremendously good gore. I'm pretty sure they used almost all practical effects in this movie. I think only the backgrounds were CG. Everything else was practical. How they pulled that off, I don't even, truth be told, I don't even want to know. I just love the magic of it all because it looks fucking real and disturbing and disgusting and fucking cringe inducing.
And then she sticks her tongue out and wags it at them after that, which is also equally disgusting with two parts
Oh, yeah.
of the same tongue just kind of like wiggling at him. So they, yeah,
Oh,
that-
yeah.
pretty gross. I actually do know a couple people who have split tongues. Like they've done
Mhm.
it through natural piercing. They've done it and they've actually split their tongues. It's always kind of weirded me
Right.
out a little bit, but like teach their own. I don't judge. I'm not.
Yeah, do your thing.
Yeah.
I'm covered in modifications myself.
Same thing, exactly. I have gauges in my ears. I'm not opposed to any of that,
Yeah.
but I just like so that doesn't bother me. But imagine doing it in just one fell swoop and just slicing your tongue open. Just nope.
And it just looks dirty and like that. It's not clean over there. We're not doing.
Yeah,
Just
it's not
a
good.
disgusting movie
Not
in the
good.
best way.
Not good. Let's talk about best kill because there are a lot of kills in this movie. Everybody minus one dies, so there's a lot of people getting killed. So, Patrick, what's your best kill in Evil Dead?
We talked a little bit about it earlier in your best line. Mia comes face to face with her deadite clone and, tells her, chew on this motherfucker. And she proceeds to chainsaw right down the middle, and they don't cut away. Credit to their Italian sensibility. I know Fetty's from South America, but clearly he's like, yeah, we should show it in a nice wide shot. Show it happen. Show that chainsaw split this deadite right down the middle of the head. The blood goes spraying like I've never seen. Like fucking 10,000 gallons of blood coming out of this thing. And then they cut to an even wider shot as the house is burning down, and that chainsaw is rip roaring through the middle of this deadite's head, and it's just flopping around like as it should. It feels very realistic and nutty in that moment, and insane, and even a little bit to me like a nod to Sam Raimi's. There was just something about it, even though it was very visually different and much more hardcore and gruesome. Something about that just it kind of it was like the sweet little send off. Of course, that's the end of the movie right there. And it's something about it felt a little bit Sam Raimi in that moment as well.
Yeah, that was good. And I also enjoy when when she saws off the deadite's leg. I thought that was pretty good too.
That's on my list of kills. There's plenty of, or on my list of gores rather.
So one of my favorite ways to kill is when it means something, like when it happens in a way that it's a payoff. And my favorite kill in this movie was Natalie getting her freaking head blown off after having her arm blown off after she attacks Eric and David with the nail gun. Because the nail gun scene is drawn out and it's so painful to watch, just constantly getting bombarded with nails like across every part of your body. And then when he finally stops her by blowing her arm completely off with the shotgun, I was like, that was a very satisfying death because she had it coming. The nail gun was just so excruciatingly long, and she just kept plugging it into both of them, and it's just like, this is getting a little uncomfortable. And then when they finally grabbed a shotgun and blew her away, I was like, this was a satisfying death because, sorry, Deadite Natalie, you gotta go.
You gotta go. Jesus, it was unrelent. The nail thing was unrelenting, and that's when I was like, yeah, I think he's into French extremism. I think Fetty likes that stuff because it's just like, stop piercing these people with fucking high velocity nails. Enough.
And I not to cheat, I am cheating a little bit here, but I also do want to give credit to the scene with Eric and Olivia when he bashes her head in with the
Oh yeah,
toilet bowl, thing. That was also pretty cool. But again, that was a close second for me. It was Olivia, but I think the Natalie one got me just because the nail gun was so uncomfortable for like a longer period of time. The Olivia scene happened pretty quick with the hypodermic needle, and then he smashed her head in with the back of the toilet bowl. But yeah, the Natalie scene, and then because again, it looked like they were pretty much done, and then of course they got the shotgun, and shotgun beats.
Oh yeah,
I guess so. Yeah,
usually yeah.
In the rock paper scissors world of horror, shotgun beats nail gun. So there you go. Let's talk about, is this going to work? Now, again, I've done a couple of these inside baseball moments of this show, by the way, Patrick, as we've said on this show many times. You come up with the categories. I react to the categories. You put everything down on paper. You have no idea what I'm going to say. And a lot of times you come up with extra categories and we just have to kind of come up with things on our own, right? It's so hilarious. I didn't tell you this ahead of time. I want to wait till the show. You put this one in here, which is the category is it going to work? And I'll let you explain it in a second, but I want to mention to you, and I'll show you the note on my phone, there is actually a line on my notes of something that 100% was exactly what you were talking about, and it's not yours.
Thank goodness it's not mine.
And it's so funny. You actually had is it going to work? I had one written down completely coincidentally of you making a category about it. It was just so hilarious that you did it, and I actually had one of my notes.
That's awesome. That's the mind meld that is Rewind to the Living Dead. This team thinks alike. Even if we don't always agree on a movie, we're still going like, why the fuck is Corey in this movie? We're still both thinking that without ever telling each other that. But anyway, yeah, I came up with this category. Is this going to work? Because I noticed, this crew is in peril. Even in the beginning, before anything witchy starts happening, truth be told, they're kind of out of their element. Olivia, the nurse, is probably the only one that's truly capable, and the rest of them just seem to not know what the fuck they're doing. So they keep coming up with these impromptu things to try and get out of a situation. And a lot of times I was going I don't think that's going to work. And a lot of times it didn't work. But my final choice for is this going to work was the defibrillator that David fashions when he comes up with the idea that this is what I'm doing. I'm going to bury Mia as Deadite Mia. I'm going to make sure she dies. And then I'm going to defibrillate her back to life. Cool. Are you an EMT tech? No. Do you design defibrillators? No, not at all. So what you going to do? I'm going to take a couple of syringes. I'm going to duct tape them together. I'm going to hook them up to a battery and shock the shit out of her, stab her in the heart and shock the shit out of her heart. And that should bring her back. You sure that's going to work? It's just wild. And by the way, props to that particular scene because it's a montage scene, and that is straight out of the Sam Raimi playbook. That Fetty really does go for that Sam Raimi snap zoomy kind of fun montage that they pull out there. But I was just how in this shit does David think this is going to work?
Yeah, that's a very rough idea of a defibrillator that you might as well just stick her finger in a light socket and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So it's so funny.
Is stabbing her heart going to work?
Yeah, you're going a little Pulp Fiction there with the whole stabbing in the heart. I don't know that this is necessarily the way you want to get a jolt of electricity directly to the heart like that, but whatever. It's so, because again, this is funny. This is totally unplanned, but I had a line. Let me see if I can read it real quick. Hold on. Oh yeah, my actual line that I wrote in my notes was, "Putting duct tape on open wounds, LOL." Was the line I wrote in my notes.
Exactly.
So there's a scene where David, after he gets stabbed multiple times, Eric gets stabbed multiple times, and David is tending to him. He gets this little tiny, gauze, and he sticks it over a gaping open wound. He's like, hold that there. And he looks around, he's like, fuck it. And he grabs the duct tape and he just starts duct taping an open wound. Now, Patrick, I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so I'm no doctor. But I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure putting duct tape over an open wound that you're eventually going to have to pull off of there is not going to be good for the open wound. Have you ever gotten duct tape stuck on you by accident? It's not good
fucking sucks.
in like a 2-second pull off. Imagine that being the only thing that's holding your skin together, and then when they pull it off, that gaping wound's going to get a whole lot bigger. So that they did it a couple times. They did it a couple
Yeah,
times.
they
They
used-
used duct tape to tape up an open wound. Now I understand duct tape fixes everything. We all understand that old saying. But duct tape on an open wound, literally, that's what I put. Duct tape on an open wound, LOL, because I was like, this seems like the worst idea. I'd rather just sit there and continue bleeding because duct tape would just be so much worse.
I would just be pushing him away, like, no, asshole, not the duct tape. Give me like a fucking towel or some shit. There's a goddamn waterfall of blood coming out of me right now. I don't need a cotton ball sized gauze and a bunch of duct tape on my skin.
They did it like twice, I think, in this movie.
Yeah, they did it more than
once.
once.
And I was just like, really? Is this like what we're going for here? Like the duct tape's got to be the way to save lives, the duct tape? I just
Also, it's nutty, but it's not the last one. There's another one where I was like, So this is my honorable mention. When again, we mentioned earlier, the Book of the Dead explains there are 3 ways to cleanse the body of the deadite, and one of those ways was to burn the body. So while she's still down there in the thing, inside the basement, he goes, fuck it, I'll just burn the house down. He starts like, very sloppily just dousing the place in gasoline, and he's like stepping in it, and then he takes like a match and he's about to toss it, and that was is this gonna work moment, or are you gonna light yourself on fucking fire, dude? You're standing in a puddle of gasoline covered in it, and you're about to throw the match. I don't think that's gonna work.
Yeah, I understand. For camera angles, you have to shoot it a certain way. So I don't blame Fede Alvarez for the way it was shot. But I don't speak from personal experience. I've never tried to burn a house down. But I'd imagine the way you want to pour gasoline on something is start from one end and go to the other end where you're going to get out. So you're not dousing yourself in gasoline. You generally don't want to stand in the middle of the room and just start tossing out gasoline in concentric circles, wider and wider, to where you're stuck in the middle and you're like, oh, I have nowhere to go. I'm just going to set the entire place and myself on fire. Maybe start at the back of the room and kind of move towards the exit. I don't know. But call me crazy.
He would 100% be the guy who like epoxies the floor and gets himself stuck in the corner.
Yeah.
And be like, oh shit, how do I get out?
Yeah.
Like he was just sloppily just plopping gasoline everywhere, and like it's all over his boots. Like they show it.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's gonna toss a match from here? Go outside, my guy.
Yeah,
like go outside, toss it in from there. Like don't do it from right where you're at. That's not gonna work out well.
He just stands in the center of the room and douses everything around him. Like, dude, go start. Like, go in the back and go forward. Just take it like a painting project. You start on one side and you go to the other. Don't start in the middle and go out. You come back. Like, no, start at one side, go all the way to the other, and then when you end, you're by the door. You walk out. Then you set it on fire. Not while you're in the center of the room.
Not while you're standing in a puddle of gasoline, you dipshit.
It just seems like a really bad idea. Although
I just don't think it's going to work.
Ultimately, it did pay off because he just set himself on fire and everything else. So it did kind of pay off because he just sacrificed himself at the end. So
they left no stone unturned, and that's another credit to Fede Alvarez and Roto and Diablo Cody for making sure that everything mattered.
Yeah, everything mattered. Next category is who gets it worst, and this was a fun one. Patrick, explain this one. I know exactly what you're going for here, but explain who gets it worst in Evil Dead.
As I said, I'm sure that Fede Alvarez has a bit of a French extremism fetish. He tortures the shit out of every single person in this movie. They all go through some hell. So I came up with the category who gets it worst. And you'd think I would go, well, Mia, probably, because she became a deadite and actually got buried alive and all. It's pretty fucked up. It's pretty bad. But I went with Eric. Eric, the fucking Dumbo who decided to read from the page that said, do not read. Whatever you fucking do, don't read this. In giant red letters, he just went and read it. Okay, so Eric reads it, and because it was such an idiotic thing to do, I think he gets it worst of all the people in the movie. And now, it's not like, I'm not saying no one else did. I'm just deciding that he got so many nails in him. He got the syringe in the eye. He just got fucked 6 ways to Sunday. He got his arm all busted up. And then he gets set on fire in the end because he turned into a deadite anyway. So I was like, yeah, I think it's Eric.
He got stabbed multiple times in the chest.
Stabbed a lot.
He got stabbed by the glass in the bathroom with Olivia. He got stabbed with the hypodermic needle multiple times. He got stabbed by me in the basement.
Sorry, he got stabbed through the hand, right?
Yeah, he got stabbed through the hand. He really got fucked up. He was, and then the nail gun too from Natalie. So he was a holy dude. He was holier than any priest. He was the holiest dude in the universe by the end of this film.
He got stabbed through the hand, and then at another point, his hand got hacked away. Like it got hacked down the middle.
Yeah.
The other hand, I think, did. Yeah. Oh, he went through fucking hell.
Yeah, he did. So I'm going to go with who gets it worse. You know what? And again, I know by the time this happens, she's already been transformed into a deadite. But when Olivia has to literally saw her own face off, I was like, you know what? That seems like a really bad way to have a day. And just just like the nastiness of like literally just seeing her just carve her own face off. And then when she turns around, her face is just gone. It just seemed like a really gnarly way to go. And you have to imagine, because you're dealing with demons or deadites in this case, is that the person's still feeling this. They're just doing it to themselves. So, like, they're torturing them inside. So I'd imagine standing there and sawing off your own face would probably suck.
I think it sucks. And at one point, when Mia does come back from being a deadite, she basically just kind of dissolves into a puddle in David's arms. I was like, it was so horrible. Like, of course, it must have been fucking torture. Olivia was definitely going through it, and her face showed it. Boy, holy shit!
And that's after she also got a face full of blood puke. So let's go ahead and like torture her. In that
she
way.
Got puked full of blood. She cuts her own face off, and then Eric caves her head in with a shard of toilet seat or toilet lid.
Yeah, toilet lid goes that ends her misery, but the face full of puke would have got me right away. That was disgusting, and it was a lot of puke.
I'd be like, I'm good.
Yeah, and then sawing your own face off. I was like, you know what? I don't want to go that way. Just go and write me off that way. Just yeah. I'll go another way. I'll jump off a building or something. I do not need to get puked on and then saw my own face off.
I'll watch Halloween Ends, but only the first 90 minutes.
Yeah, I'll watch Halloween Ends on repeat rather than go through that. So. Let's talk about remake, sequel, or leave it alone. This is the category, Patrick, where we basically take a movie, whatever we're reviewing, and we say, should they remake it? Should they sequelize it, or should they leave it alone? I know it doesn't sound very, doesn't sound very difficult to explain, but I like to explain it anyways. So, with Evil Dead, should we remake it? Which technically it's kind of already a little bit of a remake. I know we said it's not really, but okay, remake. So it's a remake, a sequel, or should we just leave it alone?
I think we do what we keep on doing, which is we keep making sequels. Because you could argue that Evil Dead Rise is a sequel to Evil Dead 2013, which is a sequel to Evil Dead 2, which is a sequel to The Evil Dead. Just keep going with this formula. Keep this mythos going, and keep it contained. Keep it small. Don't go big. Don't all of a sudden go Deadites take Manhattan. We don't need to do that. Keep doing this formula. It actually is working. You're going to have to change a few dynamics every time. You're going to have to reinvent it. You're going to have to put it in a setting that makes it unique. You're going to have to give them scenarios, like in this case, which is a friend's trying to detox their friend. That's a great scenario to put it through. Put these people through hell in different and new and creative ways every time. And I don't need a remake of 2013. 2013 is so good. I just fucking love it. And I'm so glad that it's there. It's a really great piece of horror. So leave it alone, but sequelize it.
So I'm going to agree with you on that, but I'm going to say the idea that I heard they were coming up with, which we mentioned on the Evil Dead Rise podcast, which was there was an idea originally to marry the two Evil Dead universes, which was Ash and Mia appearing in a film together. They had talked about that. They tossed it around, ultimately decided not to do it, and they ended up with Evil Dead Rise. And now they're all kind of acknowledging they all live in the same universe. Now, I understand Evil Dead 2013 is a far different film than Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness. And we've all acknowledged that Ash and that those films are a lot goofier and funny, and they're kind of made to be that way. They're not made to just be straight up horror, even though there's a lot of horror in those films. And we mentioned Evil Dead Rise is much, in my opinion, much closer to 2013's Evil Dead than Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. That being said, if there's a way we could figure out, they've said now there are 3 books of the dead. And I know Lee Cronin actually said in the interview, Lee Cronin is the director of Evil Dead Rise. He actually said, we thought about introducing a 4th book, and that would be another way to have another Evil Dead film. Now, again, I'm all for all that. I'm all for another sequel where it's just another book of the dead and mayhem goes nuts. I loved in Evil Dead Rise, they set it in a freaking apartment building, which was such a different world than the cabin in the woods, which has been every other Evil Dead film with the exception of Army of Darkness. I loved that they kind of switched it up also there, and it was just a different feel to it. That being said, if they could come up with a good way to do it, and I say good way because when M. Night Shyamalan had the opportunity to bring back Unbreakable, which is one of the greatest superhero films of all time, and Split, which is a truly, truly creepy, really solid horror film, and then you bring it back together for Glass, which was just an utter piece of shit, okay? You had a chance to bring it all together, and it's terrible. If you can find a way to get Fede Alvarez, Lee Cronin, and Sam Raimi together and get Bruce Campbell to come back one last time, and Bruce has acknowledged he's older now, doesn't really know if he can pull off playing Ash. He's getting up in years. He has to have one more Ash film in him and somehow find a way to bring all these worlds together. I don't want it to be goofy. I don't want it to be hokey. I don't want it to be, Deadites Take Manhattan, as you say. But find some way for them to come together. And even if it's just a cameo, even if it's just Beth from Evil Dead Rise and Mia from Evil Dead 2013, and they come together and they're the bulk of the film, and then somehow Ash shows up at the end to lend a helping hand. Whatever. I would love to see that. And now I would be 100% on board, as long as it's done right. And I have to imagine if Sam Raimi's involved and you get Lee Cronin and Fede Alvarez involved, like they all team up together, they could find a way to do it. So that's my sequel. I'd like them to do what they originally said they were going to do and have Mia meet Ash or Mia meet Beth and they all meet Ash or whatever. I would like to see that.
I think it's the way to go. I think Mia is a very unique character because she'd be like, I've been a Deadite, bitch. Like, I know about this shit. I know about this shit.
That's what's different. Like, that's what's different about this film.
Yeah, she's been a Deadite. Beth has faced down a Deadite and won, at least as far as we can tell. And then you're right. Don't give Ash a huge role. Campbell doesn't want to do it anymore, but give him that Deus Ex Machina moment where they're fucked and Mr. Boomstick comes in and fucking saves the day in the last and final moment, and he's over this shit. And maybe maybe all 3 books are joined and he's like, cool, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fucking, encase them in cement and dump them in the fucking ocean. That's what we're going to do. That's the end of this thing. We are absolutely done with these books and close it that way. I think it'd be great, but I doubt that the studios are going to leave it alone because I think this is a great franchise and I think it's going to persist. I hope we don't go off into weird tangents with it. Like, Deadites Take Manhattan. I hope we don't do all that stuff. But I am very curious to see Beth and Mia and Ash in the same room. I think it can be done.
And I think if you do it in a way that, and you don't have to end the franchise either, you can do it in a way where they just said, like I mentioned, and Lee Cronin said in an interview, like, what if we introduce a 4th book of the dead? So all you have to do is have Ash and Mia and Beth team up together in a big grand final battle with the Deadites. And then just the end of the film, almost like a Marvel movie, you just have like, oh, there's this 4th book, and we never knew it existed, and somebody finds it, and then it all starts over again. And then we've moved on beyond those characters. And if maybe at that point Bruce Campbell said goodbye, he's finally closed his role as Ash, and then we have, just Mia come back or just Beth from the new film, then we can carry it on in that way. Kind of like what they intended. I know I'm going in a lot of different directions here. What they intended on doing with the new Star Wars films, where they brought in legacy characters and they were trying to bring in like the new characters to kind of carry on now they screwed the pooch in that movie 19 different ways that I could get into. But that was the idea of the new Star Wars sequels, is they were going to bring back Luke and Leia and Han so you could meet the new characters. And then by the end, we'd be attached to the new characters and we'd be ready for the next generation of Star Wars movies that, didn't involve emo Kylo Ren. Evil Dead could do a better version of that because the new Star Wars movies sucked. They could do a better version of that, and they could, graduate from Ash finally making this one final grand stand, and then you hand it off to Mia, or maybe it's just Beth at that point. You know what I mean? So, and you can carry it on beyond that. But I think bringing those three together, oh man, it would be cool.
It would be cool. And what would be even cooler is you bring all three together and they all agree Last Jedi fucking rules. And that's the end of the podcast, folks. Last Jedi fucking rules. I don't give a shit.
They did not. Bruce Campbell was in a Spider-Man film, though. That is also there.
That's right. That's true. He was
in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. So
that's right.
The Tobey Maguire. That was Sam Raimi, of course. Or in Spider-Man. Well, actually, he did all three, but yeah, he was in that. So, anyways, second to last category. This is one of my favorites we've added to the podcast more recently, Patrick, which is, can we survive this horror film? And I mentioned it earlier. I teased it earlier when we talked about the decision making in this film. While it should have been utterly frustrating, the reality is the situation they were dealing with the girl going through withdrawal, and they were trying to get her off drugs, and the brother and kind of the friends all felt guilty. You understood why they stayed. So Patrick, Evil Dead 2013, are we surviving? Are you surviving these deadites?
I am surviving these deadites. I'll tell you why. You talked earlier about them discovering what was in the basement, which was just a shit show of dead cats and clearly a burned body at some point. I would have been like, yeah, Mia, I wish you the best of luck. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. See ya. And I wouldn't have known about any of the horrors that happened. I would not have stayed. I'm a travel aficionado, Damon. I'm not staying at a fucking shack covered in dead cats and sacrificial altars. It's not happening. I wouldn't have stayed if there was no basement and the cabin just looked the way it looked. I go like, yeah, I'm gonna do this from an Airbnb via Zoom. I will stay over here and keep you guys posted. You just let me know what you need. Yeah. So that's how that would have played out. I would have never gotten that far. Now, okay, let me play the game and say that we ended up in this situation. I would have survived as well. I do believe so. I mean, first of all, it's hell on earth and everybody's kind of going through it, but I would have followed the instructions in the book, and I would have buried or burned the place properly, by the way, not with my shoes doused in gasoline. I would have done it the right way. I would definitely survive this horror movie. As crazy as that sounds, because this is a fucked up horror movie, I would get out.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree. We've disagreed on, well, I don't say disagree. We've had different takes on a lot of these films, because I full on said I know I would die or I would survive. I would survive this horror film as well for two reasons, Patrick. First, let's go back to the original reason. You go down the basement, there's cats hung up, strung, and just whatever, dead bodies, and a weird Book of the Dead made out of human flesh, and it's covered in barbed wire. Listen, I'm not even going to get into like the belief structure of like what I believe in, what I don't believe in with the occult and supernatural. Okay, I love it. Don't believe.
Doesn't even matter.
But I'm not even going that far. This is cult, creepy behavior. I'm out right away. I'm out. Here's what I'll do. You say zoom in from an Airbnb. I'll just toss me in the trunk. I won't let her out, and you'll detox back there in the back of the trunk because I'm driving the fuck away. There's your detox, baby. Sorry, sis, you're going the fucking trunk. There's one. But let me go to scenario two, just the guilt-ridden brother I stay behind. I love the people I love, Patrick. I'm fiercely loyal. I will lay down in traffic for the people I love, and I do mean that. I will defend, and I will put myself in harm's way to defend people that I care about. But if you turn into a deadite, all bets are fucking off. So the moment that
all bets are off. If somebody gets that, email us and you get a fucking prize.
The moment that Mia says, "Come down here, pretty boy, I want to suck your cock," done. Well, you're not my sister anymore. You're not. Shotgun to the head, I'm out. Okay?
You're done.
Olivia, you just sawed your own face off. You're not infected. You're fucked up. You're dead. I'm gone. So yeah, I would survive because I wouldn't stick around long enough for all these people to get infected and get me. So as soon as Mia stood in the boiling bath, and we're pretending this is like an actual boiling bath, not the normal baths that women take, like an actual boiling bath, and she's trying to boil off her own skin and all that. Like when it goes full bore, like full on insanity. Sorry, Mia. Here's your withdrawal shotgun. I'm out. I'm sorry. Like I don't have that in me. So yeah, like I'm not the one. Everyone in this film falls over backwards to not hurt their friend, and I get it, Patrick. I do.
Oh yeah.
I'm a caring person. I get the heartbreak of not
I get
wanting to
it.
hurt the person. I get it, but that's not me. That's not.
I'm
who
too
I
good at
am.
this.
Like
I'm too good at the horror shit.
if we ever go into like a camping retreat and you try to fuck with me and be like, I'm gonna pretend that I'm possessed, don't do it. Don't do it because I'm like, oh,
Like,
Patrick's
where's Damon
possessed.
going?
Where's the gas can? Because I'm not standing in it, but I'm gonna set him on fire. That's what I'm doing. Like, hold on, I was just joking, man. No, too late. You're on fire now. Yeah, I just like as soon as Mia was like, going on like your mother sucks cocks in hell. Dead. You're gone. You're gone.
I gotta go. Good. I gotta go. I'm sorry. I have a thing, guys. I gotta take off.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
We're in the middle of the woods. We're trapped. We already tried to get out. The road is flooded. As soon as you people start turning on me, you're all dead. I'm sorry. I care about you. I love you all, but I got a shotgun. I got plenty of shells. Nunions are getting out of here.
Nunions. See ya.
Nunions getting out of here. So yes, I would survive because I would not play the game. She's getting kicked down in the basement and putting a double barrel right between her chest. Done. Peace out, Mia. Sorry.
Gotta go.
Yeah, there's your withdrawal, baby. Here's a double barrel shotgun in the chest. Just saying.
I'm just saying, I'd chop the whole damn thing up with everybody in it, light it on fire, and bury it.
Yeah, and not stand in the middle of the room when you've doused the place in gas.
No.
Last but not least, Patrick, with this film, is it scary? I think we already know the answer to this. 2013's Evil Dead. Is it scary?
Fuck yes. It's a scary movie. It's a scary movie on any given level. I still wasn't like, scared afterwards or anything like that, but it's got all the elements, everything you're looking for. And for the early 2000s, it's easily the scariest movie. And I think that's even like, I want to say that's like what do they call it? There's a special kind of title they put on the front of posters, and it's called The Most Terrifying Film You Will Ever Experience. And I think it's up there with those kind of films.
This is by far the scariest Evil Dead film, and it's not really that.
Oh, easy.
Now, don't get me wrong. Evil Dead Rise is a tremendous film. I love it. And it's also scary. I said that last week. But this film is like Evil Dead on steroids. I mean, it is just, it is bonkers, over the top, disturbing, harrowing, horrifying, visceral. Like we talked about, like not the traditional jump scares, but when you're pulling a hypodermic needle out of an eye, I'm done. Like I'm good. That's pretty freaky. Just so many scenes like that. Like I said, I made a list. And as you said, your list was longer than my list. My list was already pretty long. And I was like, geez, man, I'm really taking a lot of notes on this movie about really, truly fucked up moments. Yeah, this movie's scary. It's the scariest Evil Dead film. I mean, it is. And again, I like all the Evil Dead films. This is by far the scariest.
It is the French extremist version of Evil Dead. Need I say more? I think that tells you everything you need to know. And if you don't know what French extremism is, don't Google it. He'll fuck you up. So yeah, Evil Dead 2013, man, hats off to you. This is, by the way, last week we ranked them, and this Evil Dead 2013 made my number one. And after watching it, I stand by that. Hardcore fucking horror movie.
Yeah, and I'd probably revise my list to put this at number 2 now because because I think I may have actually seen Evil Dead Rise was the scariest. I would revise that now and say this one. I hadn't seen this one in quite a while. I'd seen it, but I hadn't seen it in years. This is the scariest one. I'm sorry if I said that before. I'm retracting that statement and now saying this Evil Dead 2013 Evil Dead is the scariest Evil Dead. And that's, by the way, fully endorsing Evil Dead Rise. I loved Evil Dead Rise. I can't wait to see it again. But Evil Dead 2013 is the scariest of these films. And it is pure horror from start to finish, man. It is, it is
so good.
It is a wild ride. All right, folks, we're going to get out of here. Of course, we want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the show each and every week. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and of course, you can also check us out on my website, nerdcoremovement.com. You can also find us over on our new YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. Please subscribe. We're still kind of continuing to build out our YouTube channel. We were a bit late arriving to that, so we're trying to get everyone on board. So please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you really want to see our faces, you can, or you can just, just listen to it. You don't necessarily need to see us. But if you want to see us, you can see us over on YouTube. So we are over there as well. Obviously, if you have questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, what creeps you out most about Evil Dead, whatever it is, send us an email. We are at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on all of our social media platforms. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Send us messages on there. Like our pages. We post links to the episodes and everything else. So please go like our social media pages. If you have questions, comments, or movies you would like us to review, hit us up over there. You can also hit us up on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And we want to say a big thank you, as always, for everyone tuning into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.